And that largely the simulations can be done in finite volume method or finite difference method. And FDS, which is our mostly used in fire engineering field, fire dynamic simulator is based on the finite difference method written in Fortran language and used in many industries, but primarily fire, water, aerospace, naval, petroleum, defense, weather. These are actually CFD based. I'm talking about the many CFD packages. Fire basically relevant to FDS. Recent ruling regarding the use of computer fire modeling. I think you guys probably know that there are controversies. Some people happy to use the computer fire modeling, and some are not. They argue different types of raise different questions, accuracy, and some sort of other things. I don't have most recent one, but it is 2010, one of the ruling in Santos versus State Farm Fire and Casualty Company, Supreme Court, Nassau County evidence in US. So plaintiff moved for an order to pursue to FRI hearing. FRI hearing is some sort of, in Australia, like expert evidence, witness evidence in the court. So the plaintiff wanted to exclude the testimony of the defense witness, Dr. Joseph Arbas, concerning the computer fire modeling used in the witness in the FRI hearing. And court another in this matter, Egogens J. West, a fire and arson consultant of private sector, defended the client and on behalf of the plaintiff.
We know that we'll never get too excited by health insurance, but that doesn't stop us.
Sorry, is there any question, please? So.
Sorry, that was just someone who had their microphone on. Sorry.
All right, I'm keep going, and I will attend for the questions end of the presentation. So finally, the court finds that the defendant did not present sufficient evidence to establish that there is a consensus in the fire investigation community that the computer fire modeling is generally accepted as reliable. So that means, as you can see the judgment, it is not actually talking about the accuracy of the model, rather it is talking about the acceptance to the community. So Mr. West did some arguments, as you can see in the left, where he said, we can speculate as to what was the composition or the exact construction of a room or the type of materials that were used, especially if those things are no longer available to us. Whereas Dr. Arbas describes the fire modeling does give us the timeline of a fire in terms of ignition, flame spread, release of heat, flame size, temperature, velocity, toxic gases, and smoke. And when the Mr. West said computer fire modeling is not generally accepted in the fire investigative community, yes, actually does ultimately recognize that acceptance matter. Whereas Dr. Arbas said they have been generally accepted because computer fire modeling used and developed by NIST, one of the government organizations in US, and the modern FDS models is used by many authors, and there are publications. So this has been peer reviewed. So his argument was it is already well accepted. But we have to keep in mind that we are talking about the 2010. And another court ruling, which is actually in favor of the computer fire modeling, which is Turner versus Liberal Mutual Fire Insurance Company, Dover Challenge in Ohio, which is in 2007. This Dover Challenge is similar like what in Australia, we call it the expert evidence witness in the court. Similar like FRI evidence. The court found that Liberty's expert NIST FDS simulation satisfied with the Dover standard. Dover has some of the standards to accept the witness or testimony, and judges said it is satisfied with the standard of that simulation. And court relied on the FDS simulation in WTC, World Trade Center, Rhode Island nightclub fire, and South Carolina sofa store fire. The software was adequately subject to peer review and publications. As you can see, the modern FDS, it has a list of publications, and software has known error rates 5 to 20% for the flow velocity and temperature. And again, the Liberty's computer simulation methodology is generally accepted by the many relevant scientific community. And moreover, the NFPA 91 confirms the appropriateness of the Liberty's experts model, which is, I told, the WTC model, and which is compared to physical and eyewitness to support the or refute hypothesis. Another issue is the verifications and validation of fire modeling, which is very important. I've taken this figure from Clark's books, where it is the gas layer temperature is shown here. If we can see the hand calculations is that one, which is beyond the range of plus minus 30%, whereas the CFD, which is, we can say FDS here, and zone model, which is CFAST, another semi-empirical model used in NIST, which both of CFD and zone model actually within the range of the 13% error, whereas the hand calculations is far away from that range. So generally, we can say the FDS has a good accuracy in terms of capturing the gas layer temperature in the full-scale comparison test. Origin of fire. Origin of fire is one of the important area that I believe whenever we are going for an investigation of a fire, and as you can see, the NFPA 921 also confirms that we need to find the area of origin before determine the cause of that can properly be evaluated properly. In this model, the Gregory is a full-time professor and professional fire and explosion analyst. He did study both experimental and simulation. And here we can see at the top, when there is a fire experiment. And if we put the origin of fire in the head of the matrix, this is the head of the matrix, and we can see the simulations in the right side. And we can see the damage on the wall, on the east wall, and simulations, which is red area is the radiation heat flux. So that means it captures, the simulation really captures the actual scenarios if the fire started from the head of matrix. And second case, we can see the east wall and also the south wall in the other side, and also the model here. And probably we can see here as well, the south wall, the damage is not that much compared to east wall. So simulation also captured the similar features that we can see that radiation heat flux not that much. So it indicates that if you can set up the FDS model properly, definitely we can capture the, at least aftermath of the fire, we can identify the origin of fire from the of the simulation. Another case study I want to present here today as a hypothesis. One hypothesis is fire source from electrical initiation or fire being initiated from the arson effect. So that means intentional action of ignition sources with a multiple fire places. Let's see how it looks like. So if you see the figures of this, I have taken from a journal article. If you see the electrical initiation of fire, so here we can see the fire is initiated through the attic interior, and subsequently, if you see A, B, C, D, the progress of the growth of the fire and spread, we can see ultimately the final figures here. This area is not actually, so fire did not spray around this here, where is the fire spread in the middle of the area. So this is the scenario you can from the based on the electrical initiation of fire. Let's see another scenario where arson initiation. The arson is usually used as some accelerator, like liquid phase fuels. So here we can see the multiple outbreaks due to the deliberate burning of combustible walls from these regions. And here we can see the lightening of wooden wall of the annex. From this area, fire is originating. And we can see the generalization of the fire throughout the annex. So it is generalizing. And the fire also progressing to the left side area of this area. And then in this figure, we can see here. And finally, we can see the fire is spread over these. And final one is up to the annex, we call it the damage of the workshop and storage spaces of that area. So here we can see the final scenario, which is actually for that fire. In real fire, it was found that the damage was look like similar like that scenario. So we can generally assume that probably that was due to the arson initiation of fire. So this is another evidence from a real fire, and this is the real FDS simulations that we can see that it give us some believable tools so that we can say, or we can establish our hypothesis. CFD model in fire investigation. I've taken from the NFPA 921 guide, where it says that where we can use the CFD-based fire modeling. If you see that bullet points, where space and fuel configuration is irregular, mostly it would be like wildland fire or wildland urban interface, residential buildings near the wildland or forest area, bush prone area, something like this. But turbulence is a critical element. This is another point is mentioned here. This is again, I would say, turbulence is very relevant to wildland fires, where very fine detail is sought. It may be some big buildings, maybe sensitive key areas of buildings, or even in wildland fires. So here is the short note from the NFPA 921, which confirms that the appropriateness of the Liberty's model and application of physics and eyewitness, and it says that the safety-based model support or refute the hypothesis is a good area to helpful tools. And code also, as I presented a little bit earlier in previous slides about the World Trade Center collapse, Rhode Island nightclub fires. Those fires indicate that they can be replicated by FDS. This is the World Trade Center fire simulated by FDS. As we can see, the South Tower fireball shortly after the collision of the second hijacked planes. As you can see, the right side is the FDS simulation, and left side is the World Trade Center fire. Very much we can see the similar in terms of the plumes. However, some people say it is for illustration purposes, but as we are doing the modeling, we can see the temperature range, we can see the fire behavior in terms of other parameters. So it's not only illustration purpose, it is an FDS model. Generally, FDS models, whatever it gives us to other parameters, we can predict what was the intensity of the fires and some sort of other things. Now I'm moving to another area, which is safety, as we are talking about the computational-based fluid dynamics model. There are a number of safety models, platforms. We can see the OpenFOAM, which is usually used by the FM Global. They have a fire modeling, many industries, including fire, highly customizable, but not easy to be used by anybody. Linux is preferred operating system. ANSYS Fluent is another software which is widely used. It is less customization than the OpenFOAM, but powerful in terms of industry, uses in the industries, and GUI-based software. And our topic is actually relevant to FDS, as we used FDS very deliberately in fire modeling. As we can see, the building fire, wildland fire, we can do the simulation by FDS. And PyroSim software is a GUI version, which is separate platform we can buy from the market, and we can link up with the FDS. And this is another branch of the fire modeling software. However, there are other methods of modeling. We can see the CFast, which is also developed by NIST, available software used in the fire consultancy. We are using every day in our work. Also, the empirical model widely used for consultancy, and I believe also in fire investigation. So basically, here we can see the three types of modeling. One is CFD, CFast is semi-empirical and empirical model. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit building fire and wildland fire. There are a lot of difference between these two kinds of fire scenarios. If you see the building fire, basically in enclosed compartment, not open to atmosphere. Wildland fire basically is open to atmosphere, and it brings up a lot of parameters to consider in the modeling, and highly depends on atmospheric condition. Building fire is either ventilation or fuel control, whereas in wildland fire is affected by fuel variation, wind velocity, turbulence, and open air conditions. Building fire generally modeled by design fire scenario or prescribed fire, such as you can see, 5 megawatt fire for car park or 10 megawatt for warehouse. Whereas wildland fire, generally we initiate ignition source, and we use the fuel parameters, and we develop a fire based on the fuel load, homogeneous or heterogeneous fuel assumptions, or many other parameters as well. So this is one of the basic difference. Yes, in that building fires, we can use the ignition source, obviously, but mostly we use the prescribed fire. But whereas wildland fire, we generally use develop a fire through the help of the ignition source. In building fire, we generally use the radiation heat flux as the dominant and very negligible the convective heat flux. Whereas in the wildland fire, convective heat flux in some situations is dominated in the wind-driven fires. If there is a high wind velocity, that convective heat flux may be sometimes equal and maybe even more some of the times. In building fire, two-zone models are very familiar and approach. CFast, as I said, is the modeling is used basically for the zone model. But CFast cannot be used in the wildland fire, obviously. But modeling always complex due to irregular fuel spacing and turbulence. Now I'm going to present my PhD work. Not too much. I'm talking about this, only one slide. In my PhD at Sydney University, I have done a multi-phase modeling in open foam, which is multi-phase means liquid phase and gas phase. Whenever we talk about the multi-phase, we have to understand the plume or smoke or air created as a gas phase, and liquid or solid like timber or any trees, we can, so it is solid phase. So that means modeling of this kind is fall in the category of multi-phase. So in multi-phase modeling, we have to create both gas phase and multi-phase in the modeling. Now I'm moving to the wildland fire modeling, where I did nearly more than 4 years of work at Victoria University. It was a Bushfire CRC project initiated by the Victoria University. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about grass fire modeling, also the forest fire modeling. And at Victoria University, we developed a canopy modeling, which is a form of forest fire, and also the canopy with hills. This is not essentially the fire model, but as I said, open wildland fire dictated by the wind flow. So when there is a hill and canopy, obviously the flow field is very complex, and that complex flow field dictates the fire rate. Here is the grass fire model. Originally, the grass fire model is validated by Chini et al. At CSIRO. And the left side is the CSIRO experimental setup. Right side is our FDS model done at Victoria University. And we can see the rate of spread is validated with the experiment and simulation. Very much good. It matches each other in terms of the rate of spread. Canopy modeling, as I said, canopy is a little bit hypothetical. Flow field, as you can see in the left side, there is a model, and there is a forest. What we are saying here,
78.
Canopy model. So these equations is actually, we use the leaf area indices. So with the leaf area indices, we developed a tree profile, something like this. When there is a airflow through the trees, there's a wind profile, something like this. So based on this, we call it drag model, canopy drag model. We developed at Victoria University. And we use the canopy drag model and we consider the hills, small hills. This is the big hills. And this is the leaf area density I'm talking about. Leaf area density depends on how much of the trees branches are there. And in the right side is another profile of the leaf area density. We call it the sparse canopy and dense canopy. A dense canopy is the densely populated trees, where the I have shown the tree profiles like that one is a dense. This is the sparse canopy, first one, and the second one is dense canopy. And here actually, basically, I'm interested to show here these figures, where you can see in the back of the hill, there is a recirculation zones, which is maybe very important for fire investigation. The intake we can take from here. Say for example, from the left side, wind is flowing through the hills, but in the right side, we can see back of the hills, flow direction may be in the other direction, or fire may be spreading to the different direction, which may confuse the fire investigators, I believe. So this is why I'm showing here. If it is the low hills, not much deviation from the upstream and downstream, but obviously if the hill is significant, bigger hills like 30 meter, 20 meter hill with the canopy as well. First one actually without hills, but we have a sparse canopy and dense canopy. We can see the little bit effect of the dense canopy as well. Whereas with the high hills and hills only, this is also hills only, that means hills, only hills have a huge effect on the flow direction. As I said, the flow direction dictates the wildland fire. So we can predict that in the back, downstream of the hill, and there is a significant changes in wind direction. Now I'm going to talk about S3959, which is relevant to bushfire. And as you can see the model, as I said earlier, in the wildland fire, we usually initiate fire by line fire. There is a line fire here. And white area is actually, there is a grass. I'm not showing the grass here, but I'm showing the house as an obstruction. And we put the front, left, right, and back. We put some devices so that we can collect the radiation heat flux on the devices in FDS. And I'm showing one video which show how the fire is moving. As we can see, when the fire was initiated here, so this is the ignition source. From the ignition, a fire is ignited and to the surrounding grass, and grass catch up the fires. And with the wind velocity and vegetation, combustible vegetation is there, and the fire is propagating. And in front of the house, when it is reaching just in front of the house, we have some measurement and how much is radiation heat flux received by the house. And we compared with the S3959. As we can see here, the red lines is actually Bale attack level, which is bushfire attack level, indicated in terms of radiation heat flux basically. And we can see that at least in the right side of the device is capturing similar heat flux scenarios, which is given in the S13 and 59. But we have to understand that S13 and 59 is designed based on the radiation heat flux. Purpose of this work was actually to show that is there any convective heat flux? Yes, it is there. You can see in the right side. Although it is not too much, but it is sometimes of the order of 5% or 10%. And I believe if it is a high wind velocity, it may go up to 15 to 20%. But it is not actually included in the Bell characterization. So we have published one article in there, as you can see in the below. Now I'm going to talk about another feature that we have done at Victoria University in a modeling, which is a fire break. As you can see there on the left side, this is actually there. This is a grass field, and we initiated a line fire from here, and we have a fire break here. That fire break size is actually 5 meters, and we can see the fire is propagating. LC means fire break. LC 5 meters upon ignition, and causes steady state in the middle. Fire is developed, and here we can see the fire reaches to the opposite side of the so-called we are developing without any fuel, which is called the fire break, and reaches opposite side of the fuel. So that means break fails. But if you see immediately below that, another simulation that break size is 10 meters, and we can see that this is the break size 10 meters compared to that one is wider by 5 meters. And we can see it is quasi steady, and you can see here break is successful. That means fire did not reach in the opposite side of the grass. That means we can justify the fire break by doing that type of simulation. Also, there is another study with the forest fire with underneath shrub as a grass vegetation. We can similar. We use the break width is 10 meters upon ignition, and we can see the in the middle quasi steady fire is developed, fire is propagating. Here the fire actually reaches to the opposite side of the. There are some grass field only, so that means break fails. Whereas if we increase the break size like 15 meters, and we can see here the quasi steady state, and we can see that fire could not reach to the opposite side of the break. That means break successful. So this is actually basically what I'm showing here. Even for the fire agencies, because this work was presented to the Australian and New Zealand fire agencies, and we wanted to show them how we can do the simulations and we can justify the fire break size in a forest area that we don't want to. It's like prescribed fire, probably you guys know about it. With the prescribed fire concept, we can clean some of the areas. Even in the middle of the forest, we can clear some of the area to stop the spread of the fire. And we published one journal article. As you can see in the atmosphere, it is open source. If anybody is interested, you can see there. Another model, and I have done recently, and while I was in Foreign and Global, actually, basically, I published this article in March this year in the International Journal of Wildland Fire. And this is basically the fire spreading heterogeneous fuel. If you see that real forest is actually heterogeneous in nature. Still, before that model and that publications, we generally use the homogeneous fuel bed for the fire model that I have shown previously. This is the first model so far I know that we presented a heterogeneous fuel model. This is expressed by the fuel cover. See, fuel cover 100% means this is the homogeneous one, whereas there is a fuel gap or something, 60% fuel gap. And we can see that considering the fuel gap, the fire is actually, as you can see here, in 320 second fire reaches to the end. Whereas if you have the fuel gap, the fire actually become a little bit slower. And we can see still 320 second fire did not reach the end of the fire zone, vegetation zone area. So that means we increasing the fuel cover. We can see that successively it is increasing. And here actually we can see it takes it 320 seconds to reach at the end. But other cases, that means if we have the fuel cover, it's some sort of a little bit, if we can think about, if you have the more say for example, less fuel, obviously the clear area, so fire has the less intensity, rate of spread is less. So that's why this with the 60% cover, fire is far behind compared to this one. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit about FDS and some points that if anyone interested to work in FDS and do some simulations, as I given the link, anybody can download the FDS, and this installation is very simple. You just follow the link and you can easily install in Windows or Linux computer. And there is a user guide. There is also technical reference guide. You can easily follow, and you can run the example cases if you want. Can be run in Windows and Linux. For Linux, usually we prefer big jobs in terms of the number of nodes. No extra cost for the open source software. But if you want to use the open source software, obviously you need some extra knowledge. Otherwise, you have to use the PyroSim, which is come with inbuilt with the FDS, and you can easily develop a CAD profile of a model and can be run simulation, but it is a subscription, little bit costly for simulations, usually used in the fire safety engineering consultancy. And open source, there is one option, Blender FDS, but I don't see it is very handy, but still it is possible in graphical user interface. And as I said, generally the FDS user guide and technical reference guides can be available upon installation of the FDS, and you can follow these things. These are very handy to understand and set up model. And for validation, troubleshooting, and accuracy of the FDS simulation, at this moment, I'm running 37 minutes, around 37. I will take around 45 minutes, I believe. So for troubleshooting, there are some other couple of points we can think about, like which platforms I'm using, if it is Windows or Linux. FDS simulation can be completely wrong, or platform means I'm talking about OpenFOAM or other than FDS platforms. Wherever we do the simulation may be completely wrong, given that your setup, grid sensitivity, and appropriate solver were not selected. This is one of the critical things. Verification and validation guides are available in NIST user guide. There are different solvers available in FDS, keep in mind. So even in PyroSim is available. Available solvers are VLES, LES, SVLES, and DNS. So VLES actually by default. So if you don't change it, it will be VLES. But LES is actually, if you want to do some simulations in wildland fire, you need to select LES. So for relevant model setup, user guide is always a must thing to consider. And of course, even though someone is experienced modeler, always look at the user guide and try to follow the user guide. And as I said, FDS is always changing from different version to version, and you need to understand the input parameters every time the version is changing, and generally well documented, clear user guide. Again, I should talk about some simulation results, how it is sensitive to other parameters. Generally, the grid resolutions, the mesh we are using in the model, very sensitive. Sometimes which solver I am using, atmospheric conditions, design fires, fuel specific parameters, type of solver, all these are very influencing in the simulation result. We need to keep in mind, even though, say, for example, we don't do the simulations, we can hire the third party to do our simulation, but we need to understand the simulation results, and we need to understand where to put and how to support our hypothesis. Development of wind profile is very complex in terms of the wildland fire. There are different kinds of wind profiles, log profiles, synthetic ED simulations, some sort of like this. Numerical instability, another important thing. If you think about the modeling, numerical instability may be from different sources. As I said, maybe a grid, maybe conditions, maybe fuel-specific parameters, and modelers must understand what are the causes of instability. There are many ways to handle, to understand, and troubleshoot the problems. And many parameters in FDS, if you see the input parameters I'm talking about, say for example, ambient temperature, relative humidity, and solver, all are, as I said, default solver is VLES. So many things are actually by default. We need to understand whenever we are running the simulations, default parameters, are these parameters applicable for my model? Are these parameters or hypotheses relevant to my work? These are the things we need to understand. As I said again, the default solver is VLES. You can change very easily. But if we are trying to understand the turbulence, we must select the large ED simulations, which is LES. And normally in wildland fire, as I said, we have the turbulence, we have the wind flow, we have the heterogeneous fuels. We need the large ED simulations is a must. So that means even though we are using PyroSim or FDS, we can run FDS separately with the PyroSim. We need to select and we need to understand how to select the solver and how to select the relevant parameters that could be the vital for the simulation results. If the wrong simulation is cited, hypothesis is gonna be wrong, nothing will be fruitful. And you may hire the CFD simulation, as I said, from third party. Nowadays it is available, but you still need to understand some modeling knowledge to specific hypotheses or applications that might be handy. Here, I want to finish here. Thank you everybody for patient hearing. If you have any questions, please let me know.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and just go ahead and ask.
Sorry, I have a question. Sorry. In your experience, have you had any challenge, anything of your work presented in a court matter?
Of course, there are a lot of challenges. You said the court in which parameter you said, please?
Court in legal matters, court matters.
No, actually, our work were strictly for the research purpose, and whenever we publish our work, it is peer reviewed. Normally, so far my work, I didn't face any court hearings or anything. No.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. Do you see the role of the computer modelling to be more a validation of an investigation hypothesis, or as an investigation tool to identify area of origins?
I think so, because in investigation, in fire investigation, I believe it is not, I believe, straightforward to, of course, the scene investigation is very helpful, but sometimes for fine results, or sometimes like in wildland fires, basically, there are a lot of parameters are involved. And in that situation, I presented two of the case investigations as well in this presentation. I believe the fire simulations could be a very important tool to quickly identify some of the things like origin of fire, or how did it spread from one place to another, or although you see in investigation, you have found that the cause of fire, probably the simulation would give you some extra confidence, which is sometimes very handy.
Sorry, I'm still learning to drive that. Thank you for that. Yeah, very interesting.
Thank you.
Nazmul, we often hear about Phoenix modelling and even more recently Spark modelling, in particular for wildfires. Is that essentially just a different methodology using parameters in this sort of software?
Exactly, very good question, because at this moment, fire agencies in Australia, they are using the Phoenix fire spread model. You are right. Also a Spark as well. Basically, they are using empirical model. They in the background, they use some empirical models. But as I said in the presentations, if you want to see how the effects of hail, effects of turbulence, effects of moisture, those are the things, although moisture used in the empirical model as well. But I think in the context of some physics, actually, it is just not being used because it's a costly simulation. It takes time. When there is a fire, maybe the Phoenix modeling platform is very handy to quickly find out how far it can spread. But again, for understanding levels, if you want to deeply understand the physics-based this modeling based on the laws of physics, and which is actually more accurate compared to, I didn't present here. If you see some of the documents, it clearly says empirical models and semi-empirical models and CFD. If you see the comparison, the CFD models are very accurate. And my comment is here, of course, the Phoenix is a good platform in terms of reasonable understanding of the fire that can be handy for the operations. But if someone wants to understand in depth about the fires and how fire spreads, how turbulence affects, how wind profile affects, that might be the physics-based model is very important. And whenever someone knows about these things, even though using the Phoenix model, maybe it will be helpful to take the decisions in some points. So that's the things I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Any more questions for Nazmul?
I'm expecting if anybody asks any question, please come forward.
Okay, I think we might leave it there then. If anyone has any questions, feel free to email the secretary at newsouthwalesafi.com.au and we can pass that on to Nazmul. Other than that, thank you so much for your time. It was a thoroughly enjoyable presentation. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who attended today as well. This is our first time using Teams, so we're going to be moving forward with Teams with future education nights. It seems to be the better software for most people. So in terms of our next education night, we're looking at having a social night in December for our next one. So keep an eye out for emails in relation to that. and we'll give you more details closer to the date. But apart from that, thank you once again to Nazmul, and thanks for attending, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, good night all. Fabulous night. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
guys.
Thank you.